Welcome to the Expert Network Team podcast,
where our goal is to inform and educate our listeners on matters related to finance, legal, insurance, accounting, and other interests that are of personal and business nature.
We hope you will find our content useful as well as entertaining. The Expert Network Team consists of Karl Frank of A&I Financial, Mike Miller of Miller and Associates CPAs, Jeff Cromendike of Security First Insurance Agency, and I'm Nathan Merrill. I'm an attorney at Goodspeed & Merrill.
Together, our independent team combines our expertise to provide you insights and solutions, some straightforward, some profound, for real-life opportunities we see on a daily basis. We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful. If you'd like to learn more or desire to meet with any of the Expert Network team members in person, you can contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
And we encourage you to take advantage of a free consultation with any of our team members. Just mention this podcast when you schedule your appointment.
Now on to today's podcast. Welcome to today's Expert Network Team podcast. I'm Nathan Merrill. I'm an attorney with Goodspeed Merrill, and today I have with me the Expert Network Team member extraordinaire, Karl Frank.
Hi, Nate. It's so great to be here.
And while our listeners, Nate, may not be aware, Karl, we've been apart for a while.
We have.
You've been off climbing mountains.
I have. It's been awesome. I'm glad to be back.
And I've been having mountains piled on top of me, which is a nice segue to today's discussion point, which is headwinds. And I think what we mean by headwinds, and I guess the first important feature of this discussion is to make sure we're talking about the same thing. But definitionally, headwinds meaning those events, those circumstances that act as headwinds against our progress.
Against our business,
if you were to equate this to being a biker or driving a car, when you're driving into the wind, you've got that wind pushing back on you. It slows you down. It impairs your efficiency. Hopefully it doesn't create danger, but there's always that possibility too. So here we're talking about the intangible headwinds of life.
Right.
Which are...
they're just omnipresent when you don't expect them at all.
Yeah. So I think the question is, well, perhaps first and foremost, and as I mentioned to Karl before we began talking, in that I am deep in the middle of a number of headwinds that have hit me in various aspects of my life. I've not got a lot of clarity on where we go from here, but I just had an epiphany, and maybe this is where we start out, Karl.
Yeah, this sounds really good.
And it came to me when you said these are things that we don't anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, and maybe you can speak a little bit to this, in my mind, the best place to start to deal with headwinds is to anticipate them better. When times are good, perhaps, when things are going well,
right?
You kind of build up both reserves of financial assets, I suppose, but also energy and stamina.
Yeah.
Take the time for yourself and build up that reserve of emotional strength, because that's, I think, where headwinds catch us off guard the most.
Yeah. When you're unprepared.
When you're unprepared and you're already depleted when they hit.
What's the Boy Scouts motto?
Be prepared.
Right. And plan for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom there. Oh my gosh, Nate, holy cow. I can't wait to dive in and learn more about what the heck is going on. I know only tangentially as a business partner with you.
Well, I probably won't get into the details because certainly everybody deals with this sort of stuff at scale, right? So
yeah. And we're all going to have really similar experiences and similar challenges. And so I think it should be really helpful for everybody to just kind of, hear a real honest conversation between two friends and business partners. And well, tell me, so what's going on, my friend?
So mostly good things, or things that can be viewed as catalysts. I always try to, this goes back to, I think, one of the discussions we had early in COVID, which is the framework or the mantra that I adopt in connection with these sorts of challenges is the Napoleon Hill, every adversity contains a seed of an equal or greater opportunity.
Right.
So each of these things was unexpected and disruptive. And in the instant, you're just like, you want to, say, woe is me.
Yeah.
I've got it
right.
bad. I've got it the worst. Feel sorry for yourself for a moment.
Well,
I suppose that's important, is to
It
feel a
is.
little pity
You gotta
for
recognize
yourself.
it,
Right.
of course.
But
Yeah,
then
that's
immediately kind
healthy.
of pick yourself up and say, okay, how do I change
Yeah, you
this
can't
into
stay
a
there
catalyst
forever.
event as opposed to
Right.
something that
Yeah, dwelling on it just makes you miserable,
Right.
right? But yeah, if you don't recognize it, then you're probably denying it.
right.
There's 5 stages to this psychological thing, and denial's the first. You don't want to stay in denial very long. Eventually,
So-
you got to move through the 5 to acceptance and say, yeah, I'm going to be okay. But yeah, so what's cooking, man?
Well, at a fundamental level, we've had some changes in our management that were unexpected, and
So hard.
So really, the opportunity here is, or the catalyst. It can become a catalyst. It could be viewed as a real challenge. I'm trying not to let it drag me down too much, but it's a
Right.
burden. It's
Oh.
a significant burden to
Yeah.
have operational responsibilities
Just
heaped on you when
just
you're already busy
thrust
with
on
a professional practice. And
Right. Yeah, right. Because you're a practitioner.
Yeah.
You're out there drafting the legal language.
So these are things that, in my situation, have got me to rethinking: is being in management really the highest? It's the highest and best use
Right.
question. Like
Right.
the way we've done it to this point, and I think a lot of organizations that grow face this challenge is you start out bootstrapping. It's you and a couple of other people, and you're filling 10 different roles and that sort of thing. And everything. I mean, I'll go back to
Right.
the beginning of our firm. It's like I was
Yeah.
IT,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
payroll, I was what you tick off the
Yes.
things. The software guy, I was the computer guy. I mean, everything. So eventually, you have to get yourself out of those boxes. And
I can relate.
I think what this has shown me is that we kind of need to rethink our management approach
Right.
to get producers completely out of those boxes.
Oh, I like this idea. That sounds
And,
really good. Because they have skill sets that are not their highest and best use, being wasted, just a battery drain.
Yeah, and I hesitate on the wasted because I do believe it's important for people to understand how their organizations are run, understand
Right.
the rationale behind the systems that
Yeah.
we have,
Yeah.
how they work, that sort of thing. But to actually actively manage them when you're a producer, when you're
It's a big
professional,
cost. It's like twice as expensive, maybe more.
and inefficient. And then when you have a disruption like this, it like resets everything back to normal, because the reality is when things are going well, this
Yeah.
gets back to what we were saying, when things are going well, people don't pay attention. And so when the crisis hits, then everybody has to
Wake up.
not necessarily drop everything, but you have to, at that point, because it's now crisis, invest a ton to get in there. So things like, and these are things I've striven to try to work into our workforce, is the redundancy, so that way when someone goes, you have someone who can step into their shoes.
And did redundancy fail?
In this one, the redundancy was the professionals. And so that's where we have to
I
rethink.
see. Now I got it.
Because we didn't have each of our professional team perfectly
Right.
able to step in and
be able
seamlessly
to do
carry
the
it
work.
forward.
that-
And seamlessly may not be a realistic expectation, but I suppose this is at some level why larger organizations have a CEO, a COO,
Yeah,
a
right.
CFO, because any
Redundancy.
one of those can
Hopefully can at least cover for the other to a certain
pick up some of
extent.
the responsibilities at least temporarily. So
Yeah.
so that's why I
That's
say
big.
it's a catalyst. It's an opportunity to look at. Excuse me, long COVID. It's an opportunity to look at change
And
and invite the change in. Whereas if we didn't have this catalyst, we probably never would have thought of this, and we would go on with that inherent inefficiency
and laziness, and
it's like a latent defect, just
right.
carrying along until you have the event that triggers the awareness of it.
So the event is an opportunity, but what a stressor.
It is. It's
so
huge.
let's focus. Let's dive deeper on that. What do you think you want to do? When you had this event happen and this person left, how many people had to pick up the ball?
Well, the ball's still being picked up.
Ah, okay.
But
is it being passed around between like 2 people?
No,
or
the way
like
we
10
have
people,
the way we had our management structure, we did try to employ a distributed decision-making model inherent in this management structure. So it was, like I say, it was participatory with the professionals involved with the management team.
Right.
But it was not at a depth where, like I said, there was readiness to necessarily step in and awareness of everything that was going on.
Because you didn't have to. You had this
things were going well.
Everything was going well. Everybody's an expert. They're like, just delegate, done. And then all of a sudden, that fell apart.
So we had, at least at that level, it wasn't like I just had to grab, the warmest body nearby and say, you're doing this, you're doing this.
Right.
Everybody kind of knew what they were supposed to know, and then it was a matter of getting up to speed on what we knew. So at the very least, and I think this feature of our management structure will persist. It's just the emphasis on whether it's professional directed versus having the professionals be the accountability piece as opposed to the directing piece, the initiatory piece.
How many bodies, how many people at your office?
I don't really actually
More than
know.
20.
More than 20, yeah. And in my defense, there are a few people who still actually work from home. So even in the office doesn't account for everybody.
It's so hard in this new working area to even know anymore, right?
Yeah, well, it's just...
But you don't have
that out of sight, out of mind,
right? And it's less than 50.
Less than 50.
So you're in this spot where it's really hard to pay for a professional management team, where this middle layer is just really a cost. But without them, the organizational efficiency might be worse.
True, except when you factor in how much do we anticipate that the professionals are spending running their management. So say we have 5 professionals at an average billing rate of $300 an hour, spending 100 hours a year. That's 500 times 300. That's
a lot.
That's enough to supplement.
That's a big salary.
A fair salary. And then hopefully that individual is just generally making the entire organization more efficient.
Right.
We would hope saving money on recruiting fees. That's a big cost right now for not
you.
only our organization, I'm sure tons of others.
I know.
I know there's a client I work with in the fast food industry that they have seen their recruiting costs and training costs double in the last 18 months.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, this is just about headwinds.
Because of the turnover and just the constantly having to replenish the workforce.
So you lost a person, you want to rehire that person, but it sounds like there's a structural change too. It's not just the personal side of the business, the personnel side of the business.
I think it's the functionary component of that person. I mean, I don't want to just replace the person. In fact, and this is important, I think, for every organization to understand, people are not interchangeable. The gentleman that we had in the position was extraordinary in certain ways, had a definite skill set. I don't know that we necessarily have to tie our hands to say we have to hire someone just like him.
No kidding.
What we need to identify in our catalyst or our opportunistic mindset is say, what are the most critical things this person has to do? Where can they round out their flat spots?
Yeah.
So, for example, HR is one of the considerations that we have to have someone pick up the baton and move it forward. But to find someone that has HR, finance, management, recruit, all these things, all these boxes checked.
Is not realistic.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are we going to place the priority on, and then empower that person to go out and find the people to round out their flat spots.
Right.
So in reality, it's probably going to be a more than one person solution.
Right.
Especially if we go the route of extracting professionals from direct responsibility and keeping certain elements of the firm actively managed.
Right. And so it's a little bit like jumping, right? It's a little bit like being on that trapeze, and we've reached the end as far as this one can go, and you have to let go to jump onto the next trapeze, because if you hire one person, they're going to say, okay, I need at least one other person, maybe two or three, and then the salary increases go up and the expenses go up, and you're going to hope that the revenues come in.
Yeah, and I'm going to take your trapeze analogy because I think it's a good one in the sense, but I'm going to expand that to the Tarzan theory.
Okay.
And what I mean by
like
that is, so the trapeze, like if you just never let go of the trapeze, you're going to go forward, then you're going to go back. You're going to go forward, and then you're going to go back. And you're going to be swinging through the same territory. You're going to be getting nowhere.
Right.
At times, it will feel like you're making progress.
Yeah.
And then at times, you're like, oh, crap, we're going backwards. And that's a redundant cycle. So what you need to do, like Tarzan, is swing through the length of that where it will get you, and then you let go and grab the next one, and then you're making progress.
Right.
And you continue to make progress until you reach your destination.
Yep.
So you have to let go of the way you've done it, and imagine what the next vine is going to look like, and grab that one to take it forward.
Just leap. What a headwind. What a challenge.
But yeah.
And you've got a structural problem. So you've got to hire the person, and then that person is probably going to say, okay, I've got this skill set. We need to hire for this skill set, and you've got a couple of other people. But then you're going to have a new personnel problem, right? You're going to have a new problem with who reports to who, and how is this business delegated, and how do we supervise, and how do we make sure that we're getting our money's worth, and how do we really grow this thing in a way that's healthy for the whole company. So there's going to be a new structure to your overall personnel, and
that's the new vine we're grabbing.
The new vine.
It's just gonna be different, but it's gonna be different in a way that takes us to a new destination,
right?
Rather than us swinging backwards and then swinging forward to this point in time again. I don't want to swing forward to this point in time again. While things are great, I'm not going to complain about how things are.
Yeah.
I want to move it further.
You don't want to be here again.
Road. Right.
Yeah, you don't want to be here.
And the only way we end up back here is if we swing forward and then swing back.
Don't let go.
And never let go of the next vine. Because
go.
there will certainly, and this gets to the how to deal with headwinds, is to expect them. Going back to where we started, which is when things are good, you're going to need to expect that something's going to disrupt that good, and you need to be mentally, emotionally, and financially prepared to take that leap to the next vine, which will be the catalyst that gets you down the road.
What can you expect? Let's say you hire this person and you envision, 2 people, 3 people that'll eventually need to be hired. What can you expect 2-3 years or some future date down the road to be another headwind? What could be the challenge there? I can think of a few.
I'm open.
Let's say it happens again. So let's say you get the exact right person, and you've got a couple other people working for him or her, but then that person is not the right fit after all and leaves.
Or even if they are the right fit and they find a better opportunity.
2 weeks later. 2 weeks.
Oh, that
later.
well, gosh, if it's 2 weeks,
you know what I mean? Just a real short, like, oh my goodness.
Then we may have let go of the vine, but we're sliding down the vine, I guess.
Yeah, it's
or
hard.
Or the vine, the fulcrum was too short. It's not getting us, there's a couple of analogies there. I just wouldn't consider the process complete.
Deep in the imagery.
If we don't have the person identified and embedded, then the handoff never properly
could be hard,
occurred.
Right?
So
and 2 or 3 years later, it could be the right person. Hopefully, it is. But if it's not, I wonder if there's anything you can do to think about a way to not be as hurt as badly if this happens again. Right. Maybe.
Well, that's where building out the organization, I think, comes into play, is building in the redundancy. So if you have in your organization a person who is critical, then you find two people to take on half of that person's understanding of the organization or the job.
Right.
So that, because it doesn't even have to be they're leaving. They could be hit by the proverbial bus. They could be out for an extended period with health issues or family issues. It doesn't have to be a permanent loss. It can be a long enough temporary loss where you'd still feel the pain. Even though you have that role filled, it's not like you're going to go out and hire someone new to run the organization for a 3-week absence or a 4-week absence.
Oh,
or
for
something
sure.
Like that.
Yeah. Hopefully they're just
So you have to build that redundancy in regardless.
Anyway, yeah. So cross-training, right, would be, a simple way, it would be cross-training. Obviously, for a high-level person, it's a lot more than cross-training.
But it's not going to be a one-to-one redundancy solution where you have 2 CEOs or 2 COOs.
No.
You're going to have a COO, and this is what we've done, and this is what our former executive had done well, was he broke up a lot of his operational role into 2 parts. There's kind of the operations in terms of the finance piece, and then there were the operation in terms of the human capital.
Oh, yeah.
And he had 2 people under him that could well manage each of those for a period of time in his absence.
Right.
So in some small ways, we
were there.
More covered, like I said, and then we had the distributed decision-making responsibilities within the professional staff to cover some of the things like professional development, risk management, HR, and finance.
What does that mean to be distributed? Does that mean one person was the finance, one person was development, one person was, that's the way you, and you just delegated?
We call them teams.
Ah, okay.
To create that kind of like...
And they had their own team underneath of them?
They could assemble their own team underneath
to
them.
make a decision, and you delegated that responsibility to them.
You never delegate the accountability, but you can delegate the doing.
Got it.
To others, but you're always the responsibility, accountability always lies with the person in charge of that.
What
team.
worked well, and what do you need to improve?
In that, I think it's flipping around again. The tension, as I observe it, is the tension between what you might consider non-productive activities, i.e. non-billing, versus billing activities. The tension is always in favor for the professional because of
billing.
Yeah, don't need to explain why. Is creating revenue, in part because our compensation structure is based on production.
Sure.
So is acknowledging and recognizing and not fighting that natural tension anymore. It's the jiu-jitsu approach, which is how do we allow them to embrace their billing role and still remain a participant in leadership, get to know again how. So I think the idea that we will need to move forward with is, rather than make those individuals in this participatory distributed model the catalyst or the initiators behind actions. Instead of making them responsible, we make them, when a decision needs to be made, rather than bringing it to committee and
the whole committee, they're the executive.
They are the executive of that area.
They're the champion.
And if they need to take some time to get up to speed on issues, but the executive team or the management team would run things and then run it up the chain, kind of the below the waterline decisions would be run up the chain to the partner that's in that team responsibility. And if they feel it needs to be elevated to the full committee, then they can run it up to the committee.
Below the waterline are those decisions that could sink the ship. Right.
Or
above the waterline might be there's a mistake or something, a hole in the hull or, a torn rope, but it's not going to sink the ship. It's going to slow things down and make it inefficient. But below the waterline, you want to keep it.
You want to not take flack below the waterline.
That's right. Yeah, you don't want to sink this thing.
But I think that's where, and that's unique to our business model too, but I heard this from someone else as I was evaluating kind of what needed to change, and it's consistent with like sales organizations too. What is very common in sales organizations is to say, hey, John or Sally is our best salesperson.
Now go train.
Let's go put them in charge of sales.
And
so you
what do
take
they know
your
about
best
that?
producer
I
out
know.
of production,
And then all of a sudden,
thinking you're going to create a lot of Johns and Sallys, and that's just not how it works.
didn't work.
And perhaps you could say we fell victim to the same mindset, which was we were
Right.
thinking the people who are successful within our organization, we should put them in charge, and they can produce more successful people. And it's a assumption based on a false premise.
It's a different skill set. Yeah, it's a different skill set. But it sounds like you understand some of your weaknesses. It sounds like you've done a good...
I do now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't the day out, and this is probably an important acknowledgement for our listeners and myself, is the day it happened, I didn't. The day I happened, it was triage. It was, how do we stop the bleeding? We got to get someone in to fix this.
Wow.
ASAP. You know what I mean? I mean, that's what you want.
It's so dramatic. Yeah, it's so stressful.
So the important thing there is to embrace patience, and however you meditate or however you work through your challenges, take the time to do that.
I love that.
And
embrace patience. Yes.
don't rush to a solution. Let the problem speak to you a little bit, and recognize how you've changed. I think that's the other important thing is, like I said earlier on, when you're a young organization, you're doing everything. You don't want to run your organization that way for the entirety of the company's existence.
Who
would do that? Right.
Yeah.
So you have to embrace what changes you've made from the point where you made that decision to the decision point you're at now, and say, do we need to make a different decision now to get us to the next? And so you ask the question, what happens when something happens down the road? It certainly will. I think the next challenges we face as an organization are with, honestly, this is one of those, like, what's your biggest weakness? Well, I'm just too darn honest. One of our biggest challenges going forward is going to be the growth, I think.
Are you interviewing for a job?
Right. I just work too darn hard.
Right.
That's my biggest weakness. But the challenge, whether it's a weakness or a challenge we'll face, I don't think it's a weakness, but the challenge we're going to face is going to be the growth. And it's going to be anticipating that next stress point, because I think sometimes the catalyst behind these personnel changes, I can think back on a few in our organization's history that are because the job grew to be so big, the person didn't complain enough, and the next thing you know, they're like, I can't do this anymore.
And they're out.
Right, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And not only do you not have the person to do the job you thought was being done, but you need 3 people to do the job because it had grown so much on their plate. And we just weren't having real honest reflection or assessments of what was being done by whom, that it caught us by, it'll catch you off guard. So it's not like we haven't been through something like this before, but keeping up with your growth is the way to stay ahead of, I think, some of these headwinds. You have to, I recognize this on the producer side, you have to hire ahead of need. You have to fill jobs before the need arises. If you're waiting to say, oh, geez, we need someone to do this job, you should have been hiring for that job probably 6 months ahead of that, right? In the production side, it's much easier to recognize the need because you're like looking at your utilization or your production versus your budget, and you're like, oh, well, we're tapping out here. Time to start looking for people to add bandwidth. It's harder to recognize that, I think, in management because it's not measured by billable hours or timesheets and that sort of thing, because it's a little less regimented in terms of their daily activities. They're problem solving, they're addressing things as they arise. It's not like they come in and punch a clock and do a job A, B, and C and punch out, right?
Especially if you are a producer who's the executive making those decisions. It's hard to know how many more of these non-producers do I need to keep my firm running.
Yeah, and I just have to say to any producer who finds himself in that role, abandon that mindset as quickly as you can, as quickly as you can afford to. Don't do the mistake that I feel I've done, and not only to myself but to our organization, is think that you can do both.
Right.
You'll leave people in both camps disappointed, frustrated, and
Right.
and yourself.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of wisdom there, a lot of honesty. Thanks for opening up.
Mm-hmm.
You also brought up a point that really seems interesting to me about that might be a culture question, right? We talk about personnel, we've talked about structure, but culture too, and that is that you hire people who don't complain, and they take a lot on their shoulders, and they get a lot of stuff done, right? They're cranking it out, but sometimes they take on more, and they don't complain enough. Can you expand more on that? Like maybe the flip side of having a culture where people work really hard is that they burn out really quick or too quick.
Right, and so I don't know the answer here. I'm not a management consultant, but what I would say is as you grow, you need to assume you need to do assessments of job roles, job descriptions more frequently. I have said to every person I hire within our management team, you should look to do what you're passionate about and figure out a way to be ambitiously lazy. I haven't made that up. I can't remember who coined that phrase necessarily, but be ambitiously lazy. Find a way to do repetitive tasks once, and then build a process around them. Conceptually, I know all this stuff. I'm not great at developing processes. Not my strength, but recognizing the benefit of it is my strength. But encouraging people not to just keep piling onto their plate. Like,
right.
Actually, I'm going to keep throwing stuff at you. Keep what you love, and the stuff you don't love, the stuff that doesn't charge your battery, put up with it for a time, but let's find a different person who loves that thing to do that thing. And this is, I think I once recommended for one of our book recommendation podcasts, a book called The Element by Sir Ken Robinson, subtitled How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything. And I firmly believe this. And his focus was more on how people prepare for their careers and their lives, how they select the things they want to do, which is finding your passion. But even within your chosen occupation, there are some things you're going to be more passionate about, more energized by than other things.
For sure.
And you'll be more valuable to your organization if you focus on the things you're passionate about, and be honest with, if your organization allows you to have honest feedback, say, hey, I don't love this, but I think so-and-so within the group may love it because they do X, Y, and Z. I mean, you got to be honest. It has to be an honest assessment, honest critical thinking. You can't just be saying, I don't want to do this, because everybody's got a job that needs to get done. But those types of assessments will help inform, I think, a management team who they need to add and when.
That's a great. I mean, that's just a great piece of advice. And now we're at the point where you got to say, Nate, I have this sense that you love podcasts. I have a sense that this is one of the things you're passionate about, right? You would probably, and I don't think I would either. I mean, I love it too. I don't think we would give up this part of what we're doing. But there are lots of things that you're doing right now that you'd probably give up in a heartbeat. Lots of things I'm giving up, would love to give up in a heartbeat. And there's always a tension, right? There's always a tension. You can't spend all day.
You just got to map out a path to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And be brave enough to take to like you say, going back to the vine or the trapeze. You have to be brave enough to accept that moment of suspension as you're between two tethered.
Exactly. You're making the leap. You're hiring before the need. We've come full circle. Map it out, plan it out, be prepared.
And then be willing to let go of the past to embrace a new future.
Yeah. And learn. And you are always in a little different place than you were before. You're not exactly repeating, but if you're not learning, then you're not progressing. You're not improving.
Right.
Well, Nate, I don't know if this helped at all. It definitely helped me. Thank you for sharing. I recognize a lot of the same problems that you're facing, and you opened up today in our company too, and can relate to them very well. So thank you.
Thank you. No, you're welcome. It has been helpful, but not entirely through it yet either. So.
Right. No kidding. Yeah. Well, somebody once told me that, running a business is just, moments of organization and then mass long periods of time of chaos. Be comfortable in the chaos and you can run a business.
Right. Yeah. And I think I'm getting to the point in our organizational critical mass where I don't know if I should be running the business. I should be solving
right.
$1 million+ tax problems.
Exactly.
I have a vision for what our business can become, but running it,
that's your
not
expertise.
my thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's your expertise.
I love supporting the people who do run it.
And you've got a lot of passion for what you're really good at.
Yeah.
They'll charge your engine, and the firm will be more successful too.
Agreed.
When you do.
Yep.
Good advice. Well, thank you, Nate. Really appreciate your insights. This was awesome.
Thank you, Karl.
And for all of our listeners out there, create another beautiful day. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the information we shared.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to share it with someone else. And join us next time.
If you want to meet with a member of the team, please contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
If you have special topics you'd like to hear about, please reach out to us and let us know at the same email address. Again, that's info@expertnetworkteam.com. Thank you for joining us and have a great day. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We want to remind you that listening to this podcast does not establish a client-professional relationship with any of the firms represented, nor does it constitute legal, investment, or accounting advice, and the views are those of the professionals only.
Investment advisory services may be provided through A&I Financial Services, and securities may be provided through Genios Wealth Management.